We're live.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Here we are, season 2, episode 7.
That's right.
Another episode of Teaching Tangents, which is on Spotify.
Yes, I need to put the last few episodes, but yes, it is.
It's on Spotify. We're on Spotify. You're
And wherever you get your podcasts.
and wherever you get your podcast. And you've added them to your website, haven't you?
I've also added finally, after months and months. Well, this is just one small thing among many to better promote or talk about what I'm doing. But I have added a video page to my website with a plugin that just like feeds in the playlist of videos from Teaching Tangents on my main website, which you can do the same, by the way. I don't know if you have already or not.
I haven't. I might try that. And you're is it icecreamforeveryone.net?
That's correct. Yes. www.icecreamforeveryone.net. And if you press on videos, the first thing you'll see there is the latest episodes of Teaching Tangents. Well, the latest and 3 others. And then you can just scroll and watch them and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And what else was I going to say? Oh, yeah. I was thinking of updating, putting them on Facebook as well. We could have a Facebook page for Teaching Tangents.
We could.
That
we
we're
could
both
actually.
admins for. I mean, I don't, just so that I started putting them on my Facebook page, but I've not been consistent, so I can upload the rest of them. But we could just create a Teaching Tangents page if we'd like, or upload them separately to each of one of our accounts. That's something we can talk about at some other point.
True. Or we stream it live to Facebook.
Yeah, that's the only reason we have not done that so far, as a reminder, is because most of my Facebook's closed, and it's more difficult to, well, at least for me, in my mind, I could be wrong, without an audience, because we don't have one, it's easier and more open to have it on YouTube. Now, I could be wrong, but mostly because the search function on Facebook video is still dreadful, as far as I know. As far as I mean, I could be wrong. They might have improved it. But Facebook, what dominates is what comes through in your feed, whereas YouTube, there's a bit more of a behavior to search for videos. Now, you can subscribe, of course, and when you subscribe, they come up in your recommended videos. And some of what I'm saying may be a little bit out of date because I just don't, I should look up on what the latest is because the platforms evolve constantly. But that was the main reason. And even though we both have a lot of friends on Facebook, I don't know if you're friends with your students for whom these videos are directed to. I'm not friends with mine.
Only on Instagram, ex-pupils on Instagram, not current pupils.
Yeah.
But I share they use YouTube all the time, and I share the YouTube link to and then your channel everywhere.
I mean, not that this is very interesting content because it's all technical stuff, but there's another slight reason that we didn't do this streaming multiple, and that is that my graphic card on my laptop just can't handle it. Because we were looking at using OBS and streaming and using one of the services to stream to multiple platforms, basically like YouTube and Facebook. But my computer can't really handle it. My computer can handle a Zoom call, and Zoom integrates the function, so the computing power just not taken off of my laptop. It's just off of Zoom, like their servers, I think.
One of my pupils,
and on Zoom you have to choose. You can do YouTube or Facebook. You can't do both at the same time.
Yeah, one of my pupils this week said I've shared a link to.
Also, nobody watches us live because we're not really making it a thing, really.
No, we're not.
Not never nobody, but mostly nobody. I could check.
Have a look, because one of my pupils, I shared the link to. I shared the link to the channel with the episodes with him, and it was the end of a lesson, and he didn't have any lessons that day, so he was like, right, I'm going to go watch some of these episodes.
Cool.
And then he said, yeah, I could take a little bit of one of your videos and put it on TikTok and make you TikTok famous and get loads of subscribers. I'm like, yeah, you could, but will you do that?
Good point. Has he already made a TikTok, like millions famous TikTok rich channel?
I challenged him to do this.
Yeah, I mean, he should totally do this, because I could give him the raw footage, because I've not had time to isolate like small parts. I've not taken the time to do that, to be honest. It's not been a
no. And what you said last week was
I'd like
so
to
good.
do it, but
it was so good. There was a bit that was just brilliant, and I think
my mom said we were funny, so that was like, okay, great. That's
well, great feedback from your mother. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But this week's question,
she doesn't usually watch. Yes,
kind of builds on last week's question.
But yeah, I mean, by the way, I support your challenge to your students.
Yeah, exactly.
Make us TikTok famous. Go ahead, like just knock yourself out.
Yeah. Well, he said that he could easily do a TikTok video, get loads of views on TikTok, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, I don't believe you. I think you're chatting rubbish. Go do it then if you can do it. And he's still
I love how everybody thinks it's super easy.
Yeah. So if you're watching,
you only have like 500 million people trying to do the same thing, and how many of them are actually famous?
Exactly.
I mean, within its own realm. All right, sorry. Yeah,
I'm going to call him out. So Philip, do it.
Wow. Okay.
I haven't said his surname. I just said his first name. My uncle's Philip. So I
think I've not worn this before. I've shown you this, but I've not worn it for teaching tangents.
No, you haven't. What is it? It's a white hoodie.
It's a really good Venn diagram.
So it's a polar bear with a guitar.
No. This is a beaver with an electric guitar on one circle. This is a goose with a keyboard.
Oh my God!
It gives a platypus with a guitar.
That's so good. I want that. That is good, right? So good.
Yeah, it's one of the best patterns I've found.
Oh, where did you get that from?
It comes from the super famous one.
But Busted Tees.
No, not Busted Tees. The t-shirt competition one, the biggest. Most of my t-shirts come from there. What's it
Threadless?
Called? Threadless. Sorry, just complete blank. Threadless.com. If you want, by the way, we're not sponsored in any way, but we could, I guess, contact them.
We could.
The vast majority of the t-shirts have been posting in every episode you can get them at one point or another on threadless.com. Not all of them, but a lot of them. This one
so that's where you get most of your, okay. I think I've worn this before.
You have.
Yeah, but
I was looking this morning. I'm gonna have to buy new clothes or just wear the same t-shirts in the next few episodes, probably.
That's all right. But sometimes I like to repeat, because my wife is now listened to Animal Farm, and now she's listening to 1984. So
I should read those, but I'll get onto them.
We did Animal Farm when I was at school. And then I read.
I don't think I've ever read Animal Farm. 1984, I've read, yeah, for sure. And I might read it again, but it's super depressing. So I don't.
It is depressing, and
it's depressing in the context of today as well. Even more.
Yeah,
I mean, it was already depressing when I read it. So
yeah, I found it disturbing when I was in my 20s. But you also mentioned George Orwell's on writing things, and I need to read those this week.
Really, 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 really good.
Yeah, I will read those. So last week's question was related to online learning and what's happening with students now. This week's question kind of builds on it, but in a bit more of a future idea. And we will talk about a lot of the things we talk about, but I don't care. So season 2, episode 7's question is, how will the generation studying online cope with life in the future?
How will the generation studying online cope with
life in the future?
Okay. It's an interesting question. It's a very broad and vast one, for sure, because
broad and vast is good for tangents.
It is good for tangents, but I think it's also good to have specific questions, because broad ones it's difficult to get tied into anything. That's one of the things I try to teach my students as much as possible, is to be specific. That life doesn't happen in generalities. Life happens in specifics. And your essays need to have specific examples, illustrations, and proof points to what you're saying. Because every time I see, and I'm correcting additional exams at grading. Sorry, correcting is a French word. I'm grading exams, and somebody was out of time, and they asked me if I could grade some copies. Basically, it's a favor, basically, in short.
That is incredibly nice of you.
I figure that somebody has an emergency. So, well, technically it's paid. So it's work. No, it's paid extremely little. So I'm considering this more of a favor than just paid work, because really, frankly, it would be more beneficial probably to my general promotion and pleasure to be doing stuff like taking minutes from these episodes to promote online than grading those copies. But it doesn't matter. Somebody had emergencies and asked me, like, can you take care of these, and it's going to be paid. And I'm like, yeah, you know what, one day I'll have an emergency and I can manage it. So
true.
Anyway, the point I was making there is just my eyes want to bleed when I read, like, as we all know. And you're like, no, I don't know, and I don't know, and you've not written anything that supports as we all know or any other platitude.
I'm laughing because I did a ton of marking and a ton of grading.
I must have, and I'm sure I was writing like that back then as well, by the way.
Exactly the same thing. I'm dealing with the same thing. They're given a case study and there's a bunch of questions about it. There's loads of specific reference points and statistics in the case study, and they don't use them.
I was going to make that point as well. So I didn't make up this exam. This is not my class, not my exam, but they needed somebody who knows about branding because it's branding related. And same thing. The exam was a timed exam. They had a really long article excerpt from a book that has a specific case study. And then I was reading through, like, I graded 6 different ones, and I was like, not a single person has referred back to the thing that they were asked to read with the questions alongside. And I'm like, I mean, I don't know if you didn't like the book, but I don't care that I personally, I didn't like that book. I don't care. But I'm like, but you were given this material and not a single one is just citing anything from it.
And how old are these guys?
They're in masters one.
So like 20.
So they're 21, 22, 20, 22 years old.
You see, so I can
allow. They're at a level where I'm like, you guys are doing master's degrees. You should know a little bit more of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say this stuff, you mean reading and then referring?
I have no idea because I was not, but I mean, you should write in a way that supports the points that you're writing, not just opinions that are just vapid. Sorry, but or uncharitably drivel. I'm sorry, but
we'll make a teacher of you. Now, the guys I was marking for, they're like 15, 16. And I think it was a logistical thing. They had a Word document, the case studies at the top and the questions below. And I really think they just couldn't be bothered to scroll up and down. And by the time they got to the question, they've forgotten, and they're not, because normally it's on paper. Possible. And even then I was like, wow, nobody's using the numbers. Nobody's using anything from the case study. What's going on here?
So my original point I wanted to make about the question.
Specifics.
Is that, and we could talk about specifics. I'll probably bring it back at some point because I keep banging on about it. About this question being broad. So I always have a bit of a hard time with broad stuff. But the first thing that this question implies or tries to or attempts to have a cause and effect, it attempts or implies that there's a cause and effect between the fact that students are studying online right now because of the pandemic, presumably, and their future, which is not necessarily correct. It might be, but then again, they're not. Now, there's a mass phenomenon of a lot of students studying online that weren't necessarily ready or prepared for it. But it's not the first time ever students have studied through video conferencing. There has been examples of students probably more isolated that have studied on video conferencing. There's a lot of examples around the world of programs being learned. Now, I don't know the impact or the effect of those programs on the kids' futures. So that's difficult to say. Where I believe there might be more impact, and that's stuff that is talked about in the news these days as well. But that's not only to the fact that the studies were done online. This is more to do with the general rules, effects, and stuff around the lockdowns, curfew in France, which was that, somebody who's 18 to 20 years old or a teenager is just not allowed to do any of the things that teenagers and young people normally do.
Yeah.
Mainly going out, having fun, seeing people. I'm not even talking about anything like crazy parties. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
But I mean, their social life is extremely stunted.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk of worry about the future, even more so than a few years ago. So that, I think, has got a bigger impact or bigger concern on the future. But then again, this is purely, I mean, I'm doing exactly what I was banging on about just a second ago, which is just purely provide an opinion that is based on very little. Now, and I've said this before in another episode, fortunately, this is not an exam, so I can provide references, and I can also just, I can say that. I can say, like, listen, if I was doing an exam, or if I was writing an essay, I would provide illustrations and proof points in a more knowledgeable fashion than I'm doing right now. Now, I will probably be able to pull out a few illustrations out of my head at some point, but this is just based on some news stories, some statistical information, very little that I vaguely remember, like the number of students in France who have thought about suicide has gone up massively. It's 1 in 5 now. As in, that's just like the general mood of depression is there. Now, how that compares with previous years when they were studying in person, I'm not entirely sure, because of course those kinds of articles share numbers that they're interested in sharing to push the news that they're carrying. So, but there's no doubt that life's been difficult, not for everybody. That's why it's been just digging into inequalities that were already present, of course. So now, aside from that, if the question is more implying is the fact that they're going to be, well, there's one very easy answer to that one, which is, well, studying online is getting them really well prepared for careers where they're going to do what people are doing right now, which is video conferencing for work. Maybe. So like the people who have the chance, because it's not everybody, remember, it's really not everybody.
Yeah.
Not everybody at all, but there tends to be a high correlation with people that have higher middle class jobs, like office type jobs, that can do all their work remotely.
Yeah.
Arguably because they can do their work remotely, but then there's a whole bunch of people that cannot. So having studied remotely, you'll be better prepared for all those jobs those remote jobs that are going to perhaps, for some of them, stay to a certain extent remote. Otherwise, there's also a whole category that is just of kids probably not that are having more of a tough time keeping up with the studies because they're just not interesting to follow the video.
One of the
maybe
I was talking with some teachers I did a presentation to a bunch of teachers on Thursday as part of a teaching union, and one of them was talking about online learning, and one of them was saying how in the area in which they teach, there might be more than one child in the house, but only one device that they have access to. So it's easy for us to think and this goes back to the whole specifics thing. Like, we think in our own little box, and we don't appreciate the other views, the other ideas, the other experiences that are happening for people who are attempting to learn online.
It's nightmarish for a lot of people if you don't have your own room, if you don't have your own laptop, and a lot of kids don't. A lot of kids don't have their own room, their own laptop, let alone the parents having their own computers. Who, in the springtime, that anybody who is not, it's difficult because we're talking about socioeconomic classes, but it's generalities. So I'm not sure exactly what I'm talking about, but I know those cases exist. As in people who are, middle class, lower middle class, or that maybe, one of the two parents has a job that can do from home, the other one doesn't. So the other one's out of the house at work. The one parent is there, all the kids are there. All the kids don't have don't all have a laptop. The mom's trying, let's say the mom is stereotypical, but sorry, but let's say the dad for change. Okay.
Yeah.
But the mom's gone out because she works the tills at a supermarket. I don't know. And dad's in on his laptop, but he also has to look after the kids who are supposedly working and studying. But one of them is a teenager, the other one is smaller, and they need attention, and they're hungry, and he can't get his job done. So he's annoyed. The boss is annoyed. You know, the other teenager is trying to follow the classes from his mobile phone. Probably that happens.
Yeah, I've had that. A few students doing things on their phone.
Yeah, and even or if you have, you know, that's not necessarily a money or issue. You just, and by the way, the case I'm describing, normally these people don't have a money issue. They're, you know, they're not super rich, but they're okay. They're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Or people who are perfectly finely and well off have got a house in the countryside that they fled to since the springtime last year or whatever, but their internet connection is bad. So, or just their internet connection is bad. They haven't gone to the house in the countryside. So all of a sudden you have, you know, several people in the same house trying to do video conferencing at the same time, and it lags.
Yeah, well, I've had that.
It might be just the teacher. And if the teacher's connection lags, and I'm sure it happens, then it's not just one person that's impacted, it's 25 to 30 of the pupils. Right?
That happened in one of my classes on a Friday afternoon. My internet just stopped working.
Yeah, and that's just, and this is talking about one instance, just like I had students where one instance their laptop broke down. So all of a sudden they were like, they lost some of their work. They were struggling to follow classes from their smartphone, but that was just one time. If you have a bad connection, how are you supposed to handle things as a teacher? And I know some teachers had a hard time with that.
I've had that multiple times across multiple classes with students who've been using the cloud services, and then they've lost work, which is incredibly frustrating for them and incredibly frustrating for me. But all these little, I think you can get a sense of what's happening with the little incidents, and caveat, I know we're talking from our own experience because that's all we can talk from, but listening to you and the way you broadened it out, it made me think, oh, well, there's a lot more situations that are happening. And if there are, you know, millions, thousands of kids across the country, across the world, there's such a range of experience.
There's a huge range of experience. So attempting to imagine what are the big trends around that reply to the question without having really the knowledge right now, because I've not been looking at that recently. But one of the things that I'm going to suspect is, and I mentioned this, and there's a lot of news around that, but there's a lot of specifics that you could go into that will be more valuable on how this pandemic and how the way that it's been handled, or just the effects of everything, including studying from a distance, are digging into existing inequalities.
That was a great phrase you used earlier. Like, it's almost like magnifying or enhancing it. Is that kind of what you mean?
Enhancing, not magnifying. Magnifying-ish, but enhancing for sure. For sure. And one of the ways is that, it was already getting more and more difficult for somebody to cross and go to cross. I mean, quote unquote cross is like the best word I could think of. For a newer generation to rise into another, like a higher socioeconomic class.
Social mobility. That's the phrase.
Social mobility, I think, is the phrase.
Yeah.
Which was already pretty much stumped from a lot of stuff that we already talked about last week and and a bunch of other episodes. You know, the better schools are localized in the better neighborhoods where the richer people live, and the poorer schools where the poorer kids live. So it's possible to move up, not as easily as it was for my generations, as in my grandfather was a worker. He was un maçon, comment on dit? He built stuff anyway.
A builder, a mason.
Yeah, he's a builder, basically. He's a builder.
Worked in construction.
Yeah, I mean, he's a builder. Yeah, built his own business, but he was a refugee after the Spanish Civil War, so he had nothing when he showed up in France.
Okay.
He had a little bit of support from the probably, and that's how he helped others, and others helped him in the Spanish immigrant kind of community in Toulouse. But yeah, he was a builder, built his own, and I think it mattered a lot for him, for his children to be able to go study and have a better life, kind of thing. Better life, study.
And
so that's something.
education is the way
Education is the way. Traditionally, so we're talking about stuff in the 50s, 1950s.
Okay.
Because my mom was born in 1948, so 50s, 60s really, where it was not that it's not possible today, but anyway, it happened. So all my mom and her siblings studied more or less, depending, and then my mom went into another anyway. So where I think that my grandfather wanted them to not be working class.
Yeah.
So he succeeded insofar as he managed to get them educated, so they're more of an intellectual middle class.
Yeah.
Not only working class. And me too, basically, sort of. I didn't do any high studies, but I managed elsewhere, just my siblings as well. So we had other things. We traveled internationally, several languages, a broader perspective, hardworking in many different ways. But
so do you think?
I'm just getting lost.
Do you think that mobility has changed? Then do you think it's become?
Yes, that's where I was wanting to get to. Is that so? One of the impacts of studying online or being isolated is probably the few people, and I don't mean few as in there weren't a lot of them. I mean the end result is that these days, for somebody to be able to go to a better school, to have a better life in a drastic difference, and to get to the best possible universities, or high school even, takes an enormous amount of work. An enormous amount of work in an environment for somebody that doesn't have the environment around them to do that. Does that make sense? As in,
it makes complete sense.
So in a poor neighborhood with a lot of people, you have a lot of siblings, and let's say you're somebody that has to help in the house, has to look after their siblings, and you also have to be better than anybody else in your school. Better to the extent that you would be considered by one of the rich neighborhood schools, so that you can cross over and not go to your local one and go to the rich one that has a better quality, sort of thing. So that's one example I'm thinking of. It's not the only example. I don't know. I don't have numbers to back this up. So I need to, I'm talking off my, I don't know. What do you think?
But I had never considered that, to be honest. I'd never considered the point you just made about
never considered that, really.
No, I hadn't really thought about how social mobility has changed from my parents' generation, my generation, to what it might be like now.
It's changed enormously.
I hadn't considered it. Maybe it's because I'm so.
I listened to a really good episode. Sorry, you really what you?
Because I'm so in school, because I'm so having to do this job, because I'm so I hadn't really, and because I'm dealing with a bunch of other stuff in my own life.
Yeah, sure.
I hadn't really thought of. I think you're making a really good point. Again, just not.
Yeah, I'm surprised that wouldn't have been on your radar, but yeah. And in the US, so I'm thinking of an episode that I have referred to before, that I listened to in, I think it came out in the spring, of On the Media, a podcast about media in the US. And they interviewed Scott Galloway, who's a professor in marketing at NYU Stern, and who's, used to do videos. He's got tons of videos he's a bit of a marketing, branding, big company guru.
Okay.
I'd like to read his book, which is, his book is about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which is Amazon, Google, Apple, and whatever. I think it's called The 4. But it might be a little bit out of date already, because I think the book is 2-3 years old. So it's that kind of business books that seem both very interesting and insightful, but also would go out of date very fast.
Yeah.
So I'm in 2 minds about reading it now. Anyway, super interesting guy though. Very, very, he's got a lot of content online, and his class. So he just tripled. He was talking about the fact that his class costs like $7,000.
Yeah.
And so the universities in the States have become more and more expensive.
Yeah.
The only chance you have is you either get into debt for your whole life,
Yeah.
But you can only get into debt, you don't even have the opportunity to get into debt your whole life because you have to get in those schools in the first place. So the barrier of entry is higher and higher. And for anybody who doesn't come from the right environment, money-wise, you have to do, so sports is your option, basically. And you have to be the best of the best of the best. And there's going to be like one spot as a scholarship. But the one spot was always the few spots, 10 spots, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, not many.
Tiny amount of spots was always for the idea of social mobility and to make sure that they like have their doors open to really good talent. But now the level and the number of kids is just getting higher and higher and higher. So to be the best of them, so there's really great talented kids who don't have the money. There's tons of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot. So to be the best and get that scholarship, you are the best of the best of the best, because that one example that I mentioned of needing to be the best in your school to go to a better one, multiply that by the number of kids who are in the same situation as you, and that's millions and millions and millions and millions and millions. The basic thing to realize, and it's very difficult, is that to be in a good situation, to be in a private school like your pupils, is an exception.
Yes.
Not an exception. Sorry, it's a minority.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that you don't realize are in now, and it's even more so when you start thinking about the Harari level of a global level.
Yeah.
You might not be an enormous minority in your own country, but if you look at the level of the planet, you are a tiny minority.
Yeah.
And I am, and it's difficult to wrap my head around at the best of times, to think that I'm extremely, extremely privileged living in the 5 percentile people who earn the most in the world. It doesn't change the fact that, of course, between the 5% and the 0.1%, the bar goes exponentially high, and these guys are like miles ahead of me in terms of like how much money, and we're talking about the Bezos, or not even Bezos, just like super rich.
Yeah.
So at your own level, it looks like you're working hard, which you are. I'm not saying you're not. Whoever's listening to this and thinking, but the fact is, it's extremely privileged. It's a privileged position to spend an hour thinking about those kinds of questions to begin with.
Yeah.
Because the non-privilege is like, how am I going to feed my kids?
Yeah.
And I need to I need to work hard right now, and I'm going to have to go without dinner so they can eat. Because that happens every day too, and a lot more people than a year ago, and there was already a lot a year ago. Students here have been going hungry because they don't have money to be able to study. So it's not just about whether studying online is going to have an impact, it's everything else. That goes back to my point earlier. All the students here in university because university here is pretty much free in France, right? But free doesn't mean that you can go anytime, because if your parents can't support you, how do you do? Well, you have to go find a job. You can't study. And they've been going. Some of the students have been going hungry because they don't have any other resources. And the job that they bartended on the weekend or was a barista.
Yeah,
on the weekend,
those jobs they've gone.
They're gone. So they don't have money. So they've been going to what's it called? There've been special soup kitchens set up for students of universities in France. So more time. So I think there's going to be. I certainly think there's an aspect of this question that's going to be about that. I'm more concerned in general, not only for young people but for everybody, which is the lack of social relations and being close to other people. And the general fear of others that has been instilled. Yeah. Like, that is based on social distancing. That's gonna have consequences. Yeah. What kind of consequences in the workplace really depends, but it seems like, and I don't know about the UK, but in France, there's been talk about a lot of companies and managers who don't like the fact that the people are working remotely, and they were not ready for people to work remotely. They're more in a old school, like, you're not there, so you're not going to be working. So I want people to be there. And even though the government's been telling everybody who can work remotely they should, some companies and managers have been forcing employees to come back because they've not. I mean, my opinion, this is not the article's opinion, my opinion is those companies have not done anything to evolve and progress in a way that they distribute the responsibilities and trust their employees to be to be doing the work, essentially.
But
that is also revealing those kind of middle management levels that don't have any other purpose than just going over to look at people doing their work or not.
No, it's true. There was an interesting article on the radio maybe last week where they're talking about reopening London, and some companies are saying that they'll probably scale back the number of employees by something like 20%, because what the lockdown has done is made them realize employees can work remotely, that it's almost kind of forced the flexible working agenda about like flexible hours, but still being able to get the job done.
Yep.
And then also, why do they need to rent out massive offices in the middle of a huge city where everything is really expensive? But what the guy on the radio was saying when he was talking about it was like, we need to open it up. We need to have more people coming back into the cities because of all the other shops and sub economies that are reliant on office workers, all the food places. So that it's really interesting. And then what I just realized from what you said is the people who tend to work in those jobs are going to be either some of them, quite a few of them might be students, quite a few of them might be families on the minimum wage jobs trying to make ends meet or whatever. But when you've really made me consider what a massive effect a lockdown has on people in society that I wasn't even thinking about, was not even thinking about, because of the dramatic effect on all that. I think it goes back to how interconnected everything is. If there's more workers in it, if there's loads of office workers in the city, all those other businesses are running. If there's no office workers in the city, all those other businesses completely stop.
Yeah.
And never mind all the transport as well for people coming in and out. Like I hadn't really thought much about that. Had not really thought much about that.
I've been thinking for a year for any of your students who aren't to get into that. And I haven't, well, I don't really have the money or the inclination at the moment, but to bounce off of what you're saying, the opportunity there is for more food places to open where people live rather than where people work.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe the way we work completely alters.
Oh, the way we work completely alters for sure. That's going to change. That's going to change in the future.
Working, the future. Yeah.
That's going to change in the future of the question, but whether there's a big impact, I think it's normal to be worried about that because you're a student and that is your whole world right now. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's going to make that much difference. I'm sorry. What makes a hell of a difference, I think, is that you're not going to school. You're not hanging out with other friends.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the knowledge that you have, whether it's given to you through a video conferencing thing or given to you in class, it's better in class, I think. But then again, like we talked about last year, I'm really completely certain that the education system as an institution is completely antiquated. So whether you're in a class doing it or in a virtual class, they're both equally antiquated. So that unfortunately is not changing much to the fact that the way you're learning and the way things are organized is completely out of date. The fact that you'd be concerned about it makes total sense because that's your whole life. Right now, it's important for you to be at school. It's important for you to do well at exams and have your A levels and think about your future. And it seems very important. 20 years from now, you'll probably, how much that year of studying online has weighed into your general amount of knowledge and what you do with your life. It's very difficult to say whether there's going to be a big impact or not. I would err to the side of probably not a big deal, but I don't know. That's going to depend individually for people from one person to another.
This is an interesting point you're making about like how much effect does.
And for your pupils specifically in that private school, I think probably matters a little bit less. For other people in public schools or very different environments, perhaps lower socioeconomic environments, maybe that matters more. Because why that matters more, and there were examples in France of the same thing. Some kids, just the biggest meal of the day they get is at the school canteen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were not having that during the springtime. So, and those tended to be all the way up to high school, really.
Yep.
So
yeah, there was a footballer here, Marcus Rashford, who talked about free school meals and having them accessible for pupils, and the impact that he's had by raising that. Like, people were not thinking about it, and politicians were not thinking about it. They might have been thinking about trying to save money for whatever.
Politicians are thinking about not being sued and being reelected.
That's it.
I'm sorry, but basically, like, it's a very cynical perspective. But it is not incorrect. I can't say it's the only thing they're thinking of, and of course they're worried about saving lives and everything else, but saving lives of people are going to vote for them because the older people vote more than the younger people.
Yeah. What's interesting is I say stuff like that in class, and then I get accused of being like, "Oh, it's a negative." What would you do? Why don't you become? I've had people say to me, "So why don't you become a politician?" Like, what? And try and
why
change
don't
the system.
you? Huh?
They've asked me to become a politician.
Great. Do they think would they vote for you?
Well, they say they would, but I'm like, no. Why would I want to be part of a system that's just like, no. It's not.
I mean, of course, it's a fair challenge. I mean, obviously, it's a fair challenge. Now, I also don't think that because you have a criticism type or negative, arguably negative perspective, doesn't mean that you should go ahead and change the thing that you're criticizing.
That's true.
I mean, now it's easy. Of course, it's easy. Of course, it's easy to criticize the politicians that are in power. Whatever they do, they have to make choices that are going to make a part of the population unhappy.
Yeah.
And for the vast majority of the things that have been going on in the past year, I really did not want to be in their seats.
No.
For the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I would have done better. I know that I wouldn't have. I would have tried to do things, and you can't succeed on whatever you personally want because you're part of the system. But let's say I did the things I thought were right to do. I would have still pissed off half the population because the other half wanted the other way around.
Yeah.
And it's easy for your pupils to say that they would vote for you, but you haven't even stated which of the the main two political parties are there. And if you state out loud which of the ones you're going to be there, then you're going to have a portion of your pupils that do not vote for you. Let's assume they've grown up and are in age of voting now. But anyway, that's a tangent. But
it is scary that I know that, like, I did a class when I was doing one of my classes last week and talking about exams and we're going back tomorrow, and then exams are coming. They're doing another set of exams that in the next few weeks or something like that. And so many of them they're done with it. They just like, they can't.
I'll tell you what, though, and I don't know because I've not done it, but I think, I could be wrong. This is just complete just fabrication. But as opposed to having to sit an exam in a classroom and the stress that comes with it, I think I would much prefer doing it on my own at my desk at home. Because that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Remotely?
Yeah.
So you're sitting your exam, you have a limited time, but you're just you're not in the stressful situation that is an exam room.
True.
I mean, to me, it's very stressful.
Yeah. But would you cheat?
Would I cheat? What does that mean?
Would you? It means would you use the internet?
So this is an interesting. So yes, of course I would. But so there are a couple of things. I was thinking right now of the situation where my students that are in after high school are allowed the internet. It's allowed.
Yeah. Now, okay, that's fair enough.
Also, I think that that's one place where the educational system needs to evolve and go, okay, you're at home, just be responsible. The thing is, if you have an hour and a half, 2 hours, you better to be very clear and very smart about how you use the internet. And in which case, if you do that well and your exam is improved by it, then sure, why not?
One of the things that we did as
if you
teachers,
copy and paste Wikipedia, it'll be seen.
I did have that. I've had that, and it's really obvious. But one of the things
of course it's obvious.
But they don't think it is obvious, right? That's what's interesting. One of the things
they think they know everything too.
Yeah, they do. We shrunk the amount of time we made it realistic, because given the amount of time you
must have had conversations with colleagues about that, or were there instructions from the ministry education or something like that?
No, it was kind of like whatever empower teachers to do whatever they want. But I had honest conversations with the pupils. I was like, look, if you know stuff, given the amount of time, and you have mastery over the material, you'll be fine. Yeah. If you're struggling and you try and look things up and you're trying to whatever, you'll make a complete hash of it. Yeah. You'll just waste time. And I do think there is something useful about having a body of knowledge that you've practiced and that you can recall and that you can use under pressure in an exam. I think those skills are useful. And we talked about this before about it isn't necessarily about the material, but the thinking and the skills you get from going through the school system that are useful, regardless of what it is.
And I don't know enough to say how much or how little impact. I'm sure it has an impact. But it's also difficult to say because it very much different. It changes from one school to another, from one teacher to another.
Yeah.
The impact of online teaching, because in a private school that might have better means to put a system throughout the school and put everybody on teams and have and train the teachers, and I'm making this up, but whereas maybe a public school, it's going to change from one what's the name of the head teacher, or what's the person in charge?
Principal, the head teacher.
The principal. Yeah. It might change from one principal to another depending on how savvy they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm sure there's been vast inequalities in the quality of the teaching and the reception for kids, just like we talked about the different environments for the pupils and students. There's very different body of knowledge, and there's teachers who maybe have never used or rarely use a computer, that are older, set in their ways, and just didn't want to do it.
This is great, because
there are some that wanted to do it, but just they're vastly completely outdated, and they can't manage, so
I did
some of them are barely managing. There's all those situations that make it that it's not necessarily the fact that you're learning online right now that is going to have an impact on your later life, but it's the situations. Now, the thing arguably is those situations, there would have been varying situations in class anyway, because you come up with teachers who have completely ridiculous ways of teaching, and then there's one topic for the year that is just a wash. And I've seen it. I look at my niece who's in middle school, and her English lessons are completely whack. I mean, they're just bewildering. How anybody could learn English. That's the one where she has
she had the crosswords to do, and it was
the crosswords and completely just darkened photocopies with none of the words that any of the kids knew, so that she keeps getting all these things that she has no body of knowledge to refer to in order to learn any of it, and she's expected to just know them.
You make another interesting point here about the difference between teachers and the quality of teachers. So certainly it's different between different schools, different kinds of school, different whatever, but it certainly varies by teacher within a school. And the presentation I did at the teaching union last week was about making the most of online learning. And I came up with 7 ideas of 7 things you could do, 7 simple things that you could do. And some schools are using Zoom, some are using Teams. There's a whole range of different tools and ideas. Yeah. But one of the things I think is really important, that really annoys me sometimes with teachers, is it doesn't matter what the tool is. It's just a tool, whether it's Teams or Zoom or whatever. I will teach with a chalkboard or a whiteboard and pen or Teams or whatever. I don't care. I'll just find a way of communicating it. But not many teachers think that way. They get obsessed with the tool and forget that what they're trying to do. And that and especially with online, because it can feel like there's so many things to think about. Okay, I'm quite tech savvy, so I was quite happy to embrace it. But one simple thing, like looking at the camera, makes a huge difference to their experience in class. And so many teachers don't do it, but that can make it, that's one thing that can make a big difference.
Yeah.
But
and I wouldn't even be surprised if some of the same teachers, maybe not all of them, some of the same teachers don't have a lot of presence in the classroom in person.
And that's really interesting, because the point I was making was, how do you make it seamless? How can, not that I want to necessarily recreate every aspect of a classroom online, but how can it can, and they did say this to me last year, coming back to school, it was funny, right? The principal actually came into one of my classes in real life after the first lockdown came to an end and we were teaching in the summer. He came into one of my classes and he asked a student, what's it like going from being online to being in class? And one of them actually said, it actually hasn't been that different. And I was really happy with that, because the way that I am online isn't necessarily any different to how I am in the class.
Yeah.
But that's me, not.
But that's you. And as you said, I think you're savvy and comfortable with those things. So it carries over. It seems you're a great teacher in wherever because you can adapt to things.
Yeah. And
it might seem a little
bit, thank you. But that's the challenge that teachers have. And then not everybody, how you adapt to that is a major, it's a challenge. It's really hard.
Very tough. And I'm sorry that I don't know if I'm sorry, but I was just thinking it might sound a little bit political how we're answering, or how I'm answering the question. Like, it's difficult. There are many different situations. But it's also because it's so broad and vast that I don't have a firm opinion on, there's going to be a major impact and all the kids are going to be dumb or something, because I don't believe that necessarily. But I also don't have firm information to predict anything one way or another with such a broad question. So it seems like I wonder how much it's wanting to go in a direction to think that the kids are going to be negatively or adversely impacted by an online education, and that you won't really be ready for the challenges of life. But then again, if more challenges of life have to happen through video camera, well, I don't know if you're going to be better prepared, because it really depends on the teacher experience that you had.
Yeah.
But that is true regardless.
But then you could also flip it and say, if you're the kind of person, the kind of student who's willing to give it a go, try, learn, adapt yourself, then you'll be fine regardless of the circumstances.
Yeah, and there's another way, which is also an easy way to answer it, a little bit political, like, a little bit of yes, a little bit of no, but sorry. I'll come back to an anecdote I was just thinking of and related to that. But there's also a side that is, the question could possibly imply that there's something to do with your future as a student or as a pupil, that the cause of which is the online education.
Yeah.
So you have something to blame that is not your responsibility.
Yes. Yep.
Now, you're going to have a better time flipping that around and going, okay, well, where can I make a difference? What can I do? Rather than saying, oh, well, it's because of the online classrooms.
And then when I've had that conversation with students, one of my students might say, well, what can I do? There's nothing I could do.
There's no point. Be famous on TikTok. I'm sure
Yes. That student, go be famous and go make a TikTok video and become TikTok famous.
Yeah. How many followers do you have on TikTok right now? Multiply that by 10. Then come back to me.
I'm going to tend to do that, as well as telling him
without even trying to be famous. Look at what it takes to just multiply that by 10, and you will realize you have no idea what it takes.
Yep.
Because you might succeed, but you're going to have to look at what the popular ones are doing. Look at, do I want to do the same thing? And then you're going to do the same thing, and you're like, well, I'm still don't have 10 times more followers. What's going on? Maybe you'll hit gold and go viral, and then all of a sudden you have millions of people following you. But how you hit gold?
He wasn't talking about followers.
Recipe for that.
No, there is no recipe. He wasn't. He was talking about views. Is it views on TikTok?
You can have both.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, views and followers. You can have both.
He was talking about increasing the number of views I could easily get. There was
Still,
something.
I mean, they go in steps.
Yeah, he was saying like I could easily get a video and get X number of views if I put it out there or whatever. I'm like, go do it then.
Yes,
I've challenged
I,
him.
I,
And
I love
he
that. I
hasn't.
love that. I know we're repeating that same point, but yeah, I was just thinking of an anecdote of a long form interview channel in French called Thinkerview that I mentioned in the past.
Yep.
And I listened to another episode, and it was just so annoying. They interviewed which is one of the common traits of almost every single political interview guest they have.
Okay.
This was a political guest, as in he was a retired politician, but a politician.
Mm-hmm.
2.5 hours of the guy saying nothing. And it was so, at first and he was, basically it was a bit rough because the interviewer can be a little bit rough, which is usually good and refreshing. And, they do live interviews and they have all the community answering questions at the same time. And he started off by saying, like, I just asked the community, like, if I should dial up the heat in the interview, and they're all like, dial it up, way up, way up. So he started pretty strong as the interviewer, and the interviewee, I thought at the beginning was okay, but it was just, he was saying nothing. And it was so obvious that he was saying nothing very fast. He was just all like, well, the system of the country is very complicated, which is true. But basically he was using that as an excuse to barely ever say what he actually thought of anything.
Oh.
And he spent 2.5 hours just like saying nothing, in short, but making it sound like he was saying something. And then after that, you're like, as soon as it was like, are you actually saying anything? No, you're not. And I felt the same way in half of what I was saying in the answer to this question, as in, well, there's this perspective, that perspective, but I'm not saying what I truly think. And in this particular scenario, to do with this question, because I don't have enough personal knowledge to have an informed opinion about the actual answer to the question. So I'm giving perspectives in different directions.
And I think that's okay.
No, I'm not saying it's not okay. I was just saying it's interesting that I'm thinking that because of having seen that interview and listened.
And it's interesting that you think you're being political and dodging the question when you're grappling with it.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I don't think I'm dodging the question, although a little bit. It's just that literally I don't have a personal opinion based on that one or knowledge.
Okay.
And I would like to have more, even though it would be still limited because it's asking about the future. So one way or another, it's like you're limited. But
I did want to
also, because we started off, and I'm repeating, but just circling back to the beginning, I started off by saying I was getting annoyed by students not supporting their points. And I'm like, I don't have a firm opinion about this, and I don't have any supporting points anyway. So, which is not always the case on the questions that we have, but this is a little bit. And I also a little bit blame it on what we said at the beginning, which is this is very broad.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Yeah, but when you subscribe to our channel, when you watch our videos, give us specific questions. Hone
the more
it in.
Specific, the better. Yeah.
Give Willem a serious challenge with a specific question. So he's been challenged. He said no broad questions. Okay, fine. Give him a specific one. He doesn't know what to do. Come on, guys.
I didn't say no broad questions. You can ask me broad questions because what we had like what was why
there was one really
there
was one ridiculous question, which was I think it was it wasn't do you need a purpose in life? It was why are we here? Season 1, episode 18. Why are we here? That was kind of ridiculous.
But I think look at the last few questions that we had, and I think when we have specific ones, we tend to do better. The one where that was more about like I feel like I'm dreaming and wandering, like sleeping through life. And then even last week's question was a little bit more specific.
The knowledge gap. It was
more specific. It was very similar thematically to this one, I think, but more specific. Because specifying knowledge gap was more specific than what's the impact going to be between these two things that seem to be related but may not be.
Yeah, studying online in the future. I did want to ask a slightly different take based on the question, which is about the future. So because I've been thinking about it too, especially after reading 21 lessons. So I teach, in the future, like I've taught online, great. At some point, will I get replaced by an algorithm or something, or artificial intelligence? Would artificial intelligence do a better job than me of teaching? And so that was something we were talking about in school.
Mm-hmm.
So that there was that part of teaching online. So I've taught online. Am I eventually going to be a computer in the future? That was one line of thinking I was thinking about with this question. And the other bit was being taught online, and a bit like what you were saying about trying to link, having been taught online, that's the reason why I'm blaming it on being taught online. That's the reason why I didn't do as well, blah, blah, blah. But all of that could become irrelevant when we go back to that thing about privilege and that thing about the way capitalism will just pick the group of people or the place that can provide a product the most cheaply, being completely replaced by AI and automation and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So you're also assuming that there's a future in which we're still being taught.
That's
because if the whole thing is like, well, actually, that's not really useful for kids to know anything, so we're just not going to put our money there.
I wonder if that's going to
happen. Which is horribly, like, bleak as a perspective, but these days, given like we're in full-on dystopia, not full-on, but going there fast.
That's so true. It is.
One side of the question is like, can a robot do a better job of me than me teaching? Yes, by the way. But they can do it, or not necessarily now, but they will be able to. Better job, that's arguable point, because that depends on what the job is, what we want, how we're judging it. But if purely coldly judging it by, can they provide the same thing at some point in the future, the answer is going to be yes. But then the second question coming along is like, well, why are we teaching anybody? Is that necessary?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, just download whatever you need, stick it in your brain, job done.
If the need is like, there's a society needs a certain amount of educated people, let's put robots because they're cheaper than teachers, and then there would be somebody going, well, do we really need everybody to be taught? You're like, oh, maybe we don't.
Have you read Brave New World?
I need to read it again, but yes, of course. I'd like to read other Aldous Huxley, but Brave New World is particularly the one, because we mentioned Animal Farm in 1984, but the closest thing that we have going on right now is Brave New World.
It is.
It's not 1984. I mean, it is and it isn't, but it's more Brave New World.
Yeah.
As in, anybody who doesn't accept the system will be shunned, outlawed, and to the point where they end up. Oh, sorry, I was about to spoil the book, but.
But the other interesting idea I liked and that scared me when I read
it a long time ago. Well, around the same time I read 1984. But I'd like to read more Huxley. I want to read The Doors of Perception because I've never read it.
I haven't read any. I'm not familiar with. Did he do Fahrenheit? What's it thingy?
No, that's not him.
Who was that?
Ray Bradbury.
Ray Bradbury. Yeah. Okay. So the thing I liked about Brave New World was this idea of like, everyone's happy. Why would you want to do anything else? Just accept it. Do the whatever. Get on with your job.
And the bigger implication there is just everybody's accepting things, questioning them, and you question them, and you're shunned. Live some other way, and you're shunned, and you can be forgotten by the whole society. And it's a lot closer to what we have happening now than 1984, but it's the same thing, but it's a lot more insidious. Which is why it's going against the grain, what we do, I believe, in teaching and what we're trying to do with these videos, which is teaching people to think. Trying, or at least that's the attempt, is for people to think. I think we can add all that.
I think it's a great place to end. So subscribe to the channel, give us questions, make them specific.
Like the videos, make us famous on TikTok.
Yeah, make a TikTok video, yeah. Make them famous.
I'm happy to participate in you making videos. If you need my time to make me famous on TikTok, let's go.
I will tell my student that. I will tell him. and get in touch with you, what's the best way of getting in touch with you?
You can contact me on any of you can, like, my name's there, you Google it, Willem, Willem, at icecreamforeveryone.net, everything spelled out. I am at HippoWill on Twitter. I can't remember my TikTok handle. I have one.
You do? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I have one. It's either, well, let me look. I don't use TikTok very often, to be honest. I mostly use it when I'm doing work and looking at it for trends, and so that I can.
Oh, that's interesting.
I see Willem. Letters I and C Willem. Might change it.
And you're the same on Instagram?
Yeah, I'm the same on Instagram, unless I changed it. I can't remember because I've been changing my usernames, which I shouldn't be doing. But anyway,
I see Willem. So, guys, those of you who I teach,
I might change it to HippoWill. Can I change it to HippoWill?
Follow him on Instagram, give him loads of material, make him TikTok famous.
And yeah, can't. HippoWill is already taken. Oh well.
No,
that was why I didn't do HippoWill. Yeah, I mean, I have yeah, I don't use TikTok very often. I'm following 2 accounts and I have 0 followers. I'm purposely not using TikTok very often because it's a very bad idea.
It is a bad idea.
Very addictive.
It is. So my wife had it for a while.
I keep up with news on what's trending at the moment, and if I am working on a client project, I'm going to look at stuff so that I can include videos and implicitly tell them, like, I'm down with what's going on, because they're like, look at what's happening on TikTok, and they'll be like, whoa, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about.
My wife had it, and then she got rid of it because it was a time suck.
Several of my students did the same thing. They were like, I'm destroying my life for just getting rid of this stuff.
Yeah.
They tried it a bit and then went back to mostly Instagram because they were like, this is even more dangerous, and I'm spending already too much time on Instagram. I'm not doing TikTok.
Yeah. So and the other thing to do is leave us a review on Spotify.
Yes, reviews on Spotify,
wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool.
The future's bright. We hope.
All right, cool. All right.
What were you going to say? You can't just say we should.
Okay, well, I was going to stop the stream and then say it's just because we should have ended it years ago. But I was going to say we should also just record small bits to introduce, like, I should edit small bits of the videos, but we should also record small bits to introduce the channel, or to have like maybe 5-minute things occasionally.
Yeah.
Not many, but here and there.
Good idea.